Right now, while you're watching this video, something absolutely historic is happening in South America, and I'm willing to bet that 99% of people have no idea what it means. Venezuela just made a decision, one simple decision, but this decision could be the moment historians look back on as the beginning of the end of American global dominance. I'm not being dramatic, I'm being honest, because what happened in Caracas last week wasn't just about oil, it wasn't just about politics. It was about power, real power, the kind that shapes the destiny of nations. And here's what terrifies me most. Washington is either completely blind to what's happening, or they know exactly what's happening and they're powerless to stop it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this moment in Venezuela might be more significant than the fall of the Berlin Wall, more significant than 9/11, more significant than anything we've witnessed in decades. Because empires don't collapse overnight, they collapse slowly, then all at once. And what just happened in Venezuela? That's the all at once moment. Let me show you what I mean. 3 days ago, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro stood in front of cameras and made an announcement that sent shockwaves through every intelligence agency in Washington. Venezuela was officially abandoning the US dollar for all future oil transactions. Let me repeat that. Venezuela, which sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world, just told America, we don't need your money anymore. Now, if you're thinking, so what? Venezuela has been anti-American for years. You're missing the bigger picture. This isn't about Venezuela being defiant. This is about Venezuela having options. Because here's what Maduro said next, and I want you to listen to this carefully. From today forward, all Venezuelan oil will be sold in Chinese yuan, Russian rubles, and through a new digital currency system backed by gold. Did you catch that? A new digital currency system backed by gold. This isn't just Venezuela going rogue. This is Venezuela joining something bigger, something that's been building in the shadows for years while America was distracted by Twitter wars and partisan politics. And the response from Washington? Silence. Deafening silence. Because what can they say? The traditional playbook is useless here. You can't invade Venezuela. They learned that lesson. You can't sanction them. They're already sanctioned to the teeth. You can't isolate them because they're not alone anymore. For the first time in modern history, a major oil producer has walked away from the dollar system, and Washington has no response. That should terrify every American. To understand why this matters, you need to understand something that most Americans have never been taught. The foundation of American power isn't our military. It's not our technology. It's not even our economy. It's the dollar. Since 1971, when Nixon ended the gold standard, America has had a deal with the world. A simple deal: use our currency for global trade, and we'll guarantee stability. This system, called the petrodollar, meant that every barrel of oil sold anywhere in the world had to be purchased with US dollars. Every major commodity, every international transaction. Think about what that means. If China wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they first have to buy dollars from America. If Germany wants to buy gas from Russia, they need dollars. If Japan wants to import anything, they need dollars. This created artificial demand for the US currency. It meant America could print money without causing massive inflation because the whole world needed those dollars. It was the greatest economic arrangement in human history for America, but empires built on financial engineering have a weakness. They depend on everyone agreeing to play the game, and that's exactly what's falling apart. Venezuela just said, we're not playing anymore, but they're not the first. Russia started accepting rubles for gas sales in 2022. China has been pushing yuan-denominated oil contracts since 2018. Iran, Iraq, and Libya have all experimented with non-dollar oil sales. But Venezuela is different. Venezuela is bigger. Venezuela controls more oil than Saudi Arabia. Venezuela just proved that you can completely exit the dollar system and survive. The dam isn't just cracking, water is starting to pour through. Here's what really happened in Venezuela. And this is the part that should keep every American leader awake at night. Maduro didn't make this decision alone. He made it after a series of secret meetings with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. 3 weeks ago, while American media was obsessed with celebrity scandals and political theater, the leaders of China, Russia, Iran, and Venezuela held a virtual summit. The topic, post-dollar global trade architecture. Let me translate that for you. How do we build a world economy without America? And they didn't just talk, they acted. China committed to purchasing 500,000 barrels of Venezuelan oil per day, paid entirely in yuan. Russia agreed to provide advanced payment systems that bypass Western banks entirely. Iran offered to share their experience running an economy under US sanctions. But the real bombshell came from an unexpected source: Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, America's supposed ally in the region, quietly sent representatives to this summit. Saudi Arabia didn't commit to anything publicly, but they sent a message: we're listening. Think about what that means. If Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the petrodollar system, starts accepting Chinese currency for oil, the entire foundation of American financial dominance collapses overnight. And it gets worse. Because this isn't just about oil anymore, this is about everything. Last month, China and Russia launched something called the Eastern Financial Corridor. It's a payment system that allows countries to trade with each other completely outside the Western banking system. No SWIFT, no US oversight, no dollar requirements. Brazil joined last week. India is negotiating terms. Even traditional US allies like Turkey and Egypt are quietly exploring membership. America is being systematically excluded from global trade, and most Americans don't even know it's happening. This has happened before, and when it happened before, it destroyed the most powerful empire in human history, Rome. For centuries, Rome controlled global commerce through its currency, the denarius. Every major trade route, every significant transaction, every economic relationship ran through Roman systems. Roman citizens lived in luxury while the empire extracted wealth from the entire known world. Sound familiar? But empires built on financial control have a fatal flaw. They become addicted to the wealth flow. They stop producing, they stop innovating, they start believing their own propaganda about being indispensable. And that's exactly what happened to Rome. As the empire became more dependent on tribute and less focused on actual value creation, other powers started questioning why they needed Rome at all. Germanic tribes started trading directly with each other. Asian merchants developed alternative routes. Regional powers began using local currencies for local trade. Rome's response was predictable: military force. They sent legions to enforce economic compliance. They invaded, they threatened, they sanctioned. But here's the thing about empires in decline: military force becomes expensive when you're no longer generating real wealth. Every war drains resources, every intervention creates enemies, every conflict pushes more nations toward alternatives. The Roman Empire didn't collapse because it was invaded, it collapsed because it became too expensive to maintain. And one day, the tribute stopped coming. Not all at once, but slowly. Then suddenly, the parallels to modern America are terrifying. We spend more on military than the next 10 countries combined, but our infrastructure is crumbling. We print money to finance government operations, while real wages for American workers have stagnated for decades. We threaten nations that don't comply with our economic system, while other powers offer alternatives. Venezuela just did what the Germanic tribes did to Rome. They said, we don't need you anymore. And just like Rome, America's response has been predictably aggressive: sanctions, threats, military posturing. But what if the threats don't work anymore? What if sanctions become meaningless when there are alternative systems to trade through? What happens to an empire when its foundational power becomes irrelevant? While America was playing checkers, China was playing chess, and they just achieved checkmate. For 20 years, while America was fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, spending trillions of dollars and gaining nothing, China was quietly building something extraordinary, an alternative global system. The Belt and Road Initiative wasn't just about infrastructure, it was about creating economic relationships that don't require US approval. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank wasn't just about development loans, it was about proving that major projects could be financed without the World Bank or International Monetary Fund. And the digital yuan wasn't just about domestic currency. It was about creating a payment system that could challenge the dollar's dominance. Venezuela's announcement last week was the culmination of this strategy. China now has a major oil supplier completely outside the US financial system. They have a proven model for how resource-rich nations can escape American economic control, and they have momentum. Here's what most people don't understand about China's approach. They're not trying to replace America quickly. They're trying to make America irrelevant slowly. Every country that joins their alternative systems reduces America's leverage. Every trade agreement that uses yuan instead of dollars weakens the petrodollar. Every nation that can finance development through Chinese banks becomes less dependent on Western institutions. It's death by a thousand cuts. And it's working, but China isn't the only player in this game. Russia, despite being under the heaviest sanctions in modern history, has increased its gold reserves to the highest levels ever recorded. Iran has developed sophisticated methods for conducting international trade without touching Western banks. Even India, traditionally neutral, is now conducting significant trade with Russia in rupees and rubles. The world is reorganizing itself around systems that don't include America, and Venezuela just became the poster child for how to make that transition successfully. Think about this. Venezuela, a country that was supposed to collapse under US sanctions, just announced a major economic partnership with the world's second largest economy. They didn't just survive American pressure, they thrived despite it. What message does that send to every other nation that's tired of American economic dominance? Let me paint you a picture of what happens if this trend continues. And trust me, the picture is not pretty for America. Right now, the US government can borrow unlimited amounts of money at historically low interest rates. Why? Because the world needs dollars, so there's always demand for US debt. But what happens when the world doesn't need dollars anymore? Interest rates explode. The cost of funding the US government becomes unbearable. The national debt, already at unsustainable levels, becomes a death sentence for the American economy. And it gets worse. American consumers have enjoyed artificially low prices for decades because the strong dollar made imports cheap. But if demand for dollars collapses, the currency weakens dramatically. Suddenly, everything Americans buy becomes more expensive. Gas prices skyrocket, food costs explode. The standard of living that Americans take for granted disappears almost overnight. We're already seeing early warning signs. Inflation is at levels not seen in 40 years. The Federal Reserve is caught between printing more money, which weakens the dollar, and raising interest rates, which crashes the economy. Consumer debt is at record highs while wages remain stagnant. The Venezuelan announcement isn't just bad news for geopolitics, it's potentially catastrophic news for every American family. But the economic implications go deeper than inflation and interest rates. They go to the heart of American power itself. For decades, America could enforce its will economically through sanctions. Don't comply with our demands? We'll cut you off from the global financial system. We'll freeze your assets. We'll make it impossible for you to conduct international business. This economic weapon was more powerful than any military force. It could bring entire nations to their knees without firing a single shot. But what happens when that weapon becomes useless? Venezuela just proved that a country can completely exit the US financial system and not only survive but prosper. They found alternative systems, alternative currencies, alternative trading partners. If Venezuela can do it, any country can do it. And once that becomes obvious, America loses its most potent tool of international influence. The implications are staggering. Countries that have been complying with American demands out of fear might suddenly decide they have options. US allies who have been reluctant to challenge Washington might start questioning why they need to follow American leadership. The entire architecture of global power could shift in a matter of months. This exact scenario has happened before in history, and when it happened, it ended an empire that dominated the world for centuries. Great Britain. After World War II, Britain was exhausted. They had won the war, but at enormous cost. Their economy was shattered, their military was overextended, their empire was becoming too expensive to maintain. But Britain still had one advantage. The pound sterling was the world's reserve currency. Global trade was conducted in pounds. International reserves were held in pounds. Britain could still finance its operations by essentially printing money that the world had to accept. Sound familiar? The end came suddenly. In 1956, Britain and France invaded Egypt to retake control of the Suez Canal. President Eisenhower faced a choice: support America's closest allies or oppose military action that could destabilize the global economy. Eisenhower chose option 3. He launched an economic war against Britain. America used its growing financial influence to trigger a run on the pound. British currency reserves evaporated in days. The government in London faced a choice: abandon the invasion or watch their economy collapse. They abandoned the invasion, and in that moment, the world realized that Britain was no longer a global power. America was. The pound's role as the world's reserve currency ended almost immediately. International trade shifted to dollars. Global reserves moved to American banks. Britain went from global hegemon to regional power in less than a decade. What happened to Britain is happening to America right now. The only difference is the timeline and the players. China is playing the role that America played in 1956. They have the economic strength to challenge the existing system. They have alternative institutions ready to replace Western ones. And they have the patience to let America exhaust itself through military overextension and economic mismanagement. Venezuela's announcement is the equivalent of the Suez Crisis. It's the moment when the world realizes that American financial dominance can be challenged successfully. And just like Britain discovered in 1956, once that perception changes, the reality changes with it. Fast. The terrifying question is, what comes after American dominance ends? Because history shows us that transitions between global powers are rarely peaceful. When one empire falls and another rises, the period in between is usually marked by conflict, instability, and suffering. We might be entering one of those periods right now. So, where does this leave America? Where does this leave you? The honest answer is nobody knows for certain, but we can look at the trends and make educated guesses about what comes next. In the short term, expect more countries to follow Venezuela's example. Brazil has already signaled interest in conducting more trade in yuan. Argentina is exploring alternatives to dollar-denominated debt. Even Mexico, America's closest neighbor, is quietly diversifying its currency reserves. Each defection makes the next one easier. Each success story provides a roadmap for other nations to follow. The momentum is building, and momentum in geopolitics is almost impossible to stop. In the medium term, expect America to respond more aggressively. Economic sanctions will increase, military threats will escalate, political pressure on allies will intensify. But here's the problem. These traditional tools are becoming less effective. Countries that have already left the system can't be sanctioned through that system. Nations with alternative trading partners can't be economically isolated. Allies who see the writing on the wall might start hedging their bets. In the long term, we're looking at a multipolar world where America is one power among several rather than the dominant global hegemon. This isn't necessarily catastrophic for ordinary Americans. Countries can be prosperous without being empires. Nations can thrive without dominating others. But it will require fundamental changes in how America operates. Less military intervention abroad, more investment in domestic infrastructure, less financial engineering, more actual productivity. The question is whether American leadership is capable of managing this transition peacefully, or whether they'll try to maintain dominance through increasingly desperate measures. Here's the truth that nobody in Washington wants to admit. The era of unchallenged American dominance is ending, whether we like it or not. The choice isn't whether to maintain the empire. The choice is how to manage its decline. We can follow the Roman model, double down on military force, exhaust our resources trying to maintain control, and collapse dramatically when the system finally breaks. Or we can follow a different path. We can acknowledge that the world has changed. We can adapt our systems to work in a multipolar environment. We can focus on building a strong, prosperous nation rather than a global empire. The Venezuelan announcement is a warning. It's not too late to choose the second path, but the window for peaceful transition is closing rapidly. Every day that American leaders refuse to acknowledge this new reality is a day closer to a more traumatic adjustment. Every month spent trying to maintain an unsustainable system is a month that could have been used building a sustainable alternative. The empire is ending. The only question is how. Venezuela, a country that most Americans couldn't find on a map, just changed the course of world history. They proved that the American financial system isn't indispensable. They demonstrated that alternatives exist. They showed other nations a path forward that doesn't require Washington's approval. And they did it while America was distracted by partisan politics and cultural wars. This is how empires end in the modern world, not with invasions or dramatic battles, but with quiet announcements that gradually make the empire irrelevant. The Roman Empire didn't fall in a day, the British Empire didn't collapse overnight, and the American Empire won't disappear suddenly. But when historians look back on this moment, they might identify Venezuela's decision as the beginning of the end. The real question isn't whether America can stop this shift. The real question is whether America even realizes the empire is already collapsing. And based on the silence from Washington last week, I'm not sure they do. The revolution has begun. It's just not the revolution anyone expected. And it's happening in Spanish,